I never thought I'd be sitting here telling you this story, but here we are. You know, they say blood is thicker than water, but sometimes I wonder if that's just something we tell ourselves to feel better about the people who hurt us the most. My daughter Sarah called me useless. Not behind my back, not in a moment of anger that she'd later regret. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "Mom, you're useless. You've always been useless, and now you're just a burden." I'm 72 years old, and in all my years on this earth, no one had ever spoken to me like that. Not even my ex-husband during our worst fights. But my own daughter, the child I carried for 9 months, the baby I stayed up with night after night when she was sick, the little girl I taught to ride a bike and helped with homework. She called me useless. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because this story doesn't start with Sarah's cruelty. It starts with love and hope and all the things that make a mother's heart sing. I was 23 when I had Sarah. Young, maybe too young, but I was so excited to be a mother. Her father, Michael, well, let's just say he wasn't ready for the responsibility. He stuck around for about 3 years, on and off, mostly off, before he finally disappeared for good. Child support? Never saw a dime. So it was just me and Sarah against the world. I worked as a seamstress at a local factory during the day and took in alterations at night. The pay wasn't much, but it was enough to keep us afloat. Sarah was such a bright little girl, always asking questions, always curious about everything. I used to tell her she was going to be somebody important someday. I saved every penny I could for her education. While other mothers were buying themselves new clothes or going out with friends, I was putting money aside in a coffee can I kept hidden in my bedroom closet. $5 here, $10 there. It added up over the years. Sarah was smart, just like I always knew she would be. She got good grades in school, was involved in clubs, had friends. I was so proud of her. When she graduated high school, I had enough saved up to help her through community college. She wanted to study business, said she was going to make something of herself. And she did. After community college, she transferred to a 4-year university on a partial scholarship. I worked extra hours to help with the remaining costs. My hands were raw from all the sewing, my back ached from hunching over the machine. But every time I saw Sarah's report card, every time she called to tell me about some success at school, it was all worth it. She graduated with honors and got a job at an accounting firm. Within a few years, she was making more money than I'd ever dreamed of. She met a man named Robert, a lawyer, and they got married in a beautiful ceremony that I helped pay for. I was so happy for her, so proud of what she'd accomplished. Sarah and Robert bought a big house in the suburbs and had 2 children, my grandchildren Emma and Lucas. For a while, everything seemed perfect. I was the doting grandmother, babysitting whenever they needed, helping out however I could. But somewhere along the way, things started to change. Sarah became different. Success changed her. Money changed her. She started making comments about my small apartment, my old car, my simple clothes. "Mom, you really should update your wardrobe," she'd say when I'd come to visit. "You're embarrassing yourself." Or, "Mom, this car is a death trap. How do you even drive this thing?" I tried to laugh it off. I told myself she was just trying to help, that she wanted better for me because she loved me. But the comments got meaner, more frequent. When I turned 65 and finally retired from the factory, Sarah's attitude toward me completely shifted. I went from being the hard-working mother she was proud of to being, in her eyes, a useless old woman with nothing to contribute. "What do you even do all day?" she'd ask when I'd call to chat. "I read, I garden, I volunteer at the church." "That's not a real life, Mom, that's just existing." It hurt, but I made excuses for her. She was busy with her career, her family, her important life. She didn't mean to be cruel. But then her grandmother, my mother, died. Mom was 91 and had been sick for months, I was her primary caregiver, visiting her every day, making sure she took her medications, helping her with everything she needed. Sarah barely visited, always too busy with work or the kids' activities. When Mom passed, I was devastated. She'd been my best friend, my confidant, the one person who always believed in me. But Mom had also been, well, she'd been better with money than I ever was. She owned her house outright, had savings, some investments. Nothing huge, but a decent amount for a woman who'd worked as a school cafeteria worker her whole life. The day after the funeral, Sarah came to my apartment. She seemed different, more focused than I'd seen her during the grieving process. "Mom, we need to talk about Grandma's estate," she said, settling herself on my old couch like she owned the place. "What about it?" "Well, obviously you're going to inherit everything. And honestly, Mom, you're not equipped to handle that kind of responsibility." I stared at her. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you've never been good with money. You've never owned property, never had investments. You'll probably just waste it all or get scammed by some con artist." "Sarah, I managed to raise you on my own, put you through college, and take care of your grandmother for the last 5 years of her life. I think I can handle my own finances." She laughed. Actually laughed. "Mom, you live in a tiny apartment and drive a car that's older than my children. You buy your clothes at thrift stores. You clearly don't understand how money works." That stung. Yes, I lived modestly, but it was by choice. I'd always been careful with money because I'd had to be. But I wasn't stupid, and I wasn't helpless. "What are you suggesting?" I asked. "I think you should sign over power of attorney to me. Let me handle Grandma's estate, invest the money properly, make sure you're taken care of." Something in her tone made me uncomfortable. This wasn't a daughter concerned about her mother's welfare. This was something else entirely. "I don't think that's necessary," I said carefully. Sarah's expression hardened. "Mom, be realistic. You're 70 years old. You're not getting any younger. What happens when you get sick? What happens when you can't take care of yourself anymore?" "I'm healthy as a horse, Sarah. My doctor says I have the blood pressure of someone half my age." "For now? But things change quickly at your age. Wouldn't it be better to have everything set up properly now before there's a crisis?" I didn't like where this conversation was going. "I need to think about it." "Think about what? Mom? I'm trying to help you. I have experience with financial planning, estate management. You don't." I said I need to think about it. Sarah left that day frustrated, but I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Over the next few weeks, the pressure intensified. Sarah called constantly, always bringing up my situation, always pushing for me to sign over control of my finances to her. "Mom, I talked to Robert about your case. He says the longer you wait to set up proper estate planning, the more complicated it becomes." "My case?" "Sarah, your grandmother just died. I haven't even received any inheritance yet. But when you do, you need to be prepared. You need professional help." Professional help. From my daughter who'd never shown any interest in helping me with anything until there was money involved. The calls became more frequent, more insistent. Sarah started bringing the children when she visited, and I noticed she'd coach them to say things like, "Grandma, Mommy says you need help managing your money." It was manipulation, pure and simple, and it was breaking my heart. When my mother's will was finally read, I inherited exactly what I'd expected. Her house, her savings account with about $40,000, and a small investment portfolio worth maybe $20,000 more. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to make me comfortable for the rest of my life. Sarah was at the will reading, of course. She listened intently as the lawyer read through the details, and I could practically see her calculating numbers in her head. Afterward, as we walked to our cars, Sarah put her arm around me. "See, Mom? This is exactly what I was talking about. This is a significant amount of money. You need professional management." "Sarah, it's $60,000, not $60 million. It's more than you've ever had at one time. Don't you want to make sure it lasts? Don't you want to leave something for Emma and Lucas? There it was, the real reason she was so concerned about my finances. She wasn't worried about my welfare. She was worried about her inheritance. The money will last just fine, I said. I'm going to sell Mom's house, put that money with the rest, and live comfortably. Mom, you can't just put it in a savings account. Inflation will eat it up. You need real investments, proper diversification. I'll figure it out. With what knowledge? Mom, you've never invested a penny in your life. That's when she said it. We were standing in the parking lot of the lawyer's office, other people walking by, and Sarah looked at me with such contempt that it took my breath away. Mom, let's be honest here. You're useless when it comes to this stuff. You've always been useless, and now you're just a burden. The best thing you can do is let someone who actually knows what they're doing handle this for you. Useless. Burden. The words hit me like physical blows. I looked at my daughter, this woman I'd sacrificed everything for, and I saw a stranger. A cruel, greedy stranger who saw her own mother as nothing more than an obstacle to her inheritance. I need to go, I said quietly. Mom, we're not done talking about this. Yes, we are. I got in my old car and drove home, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. When I got to my apartment, I sat on my couch and cried. I cried for the daughter I thought I'd raised, the woman I thought she'd become. I cried for the relationship we'd lost, the trust that had been broken. But most of all, I cried because I felt so alone. My mother was gone. My daughter had turned against me, and I had no one left who really cared about me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what Sarah had said, about how she saw me. Useless. Had I really failed so completely as a mother? Had I raised a child who could look at me with such disdain? The next morning, I made a decision. I called the lawyer who'd handled my mother's estate, a kind man named James Patterson. Mr. Patterson, I need to ask you something. My daughter is pressuring me to give her power of attorney over my inheritance. She says I'm not capable of managing it myself. There was a pause. Mrs. Williams, how do you feel about that? Honestly, I think she's more interested in controlling my money than helping me. I see. Well, let me ask you this. Do you feel capable of managing your own affairs? Yes, I do. I've been managing my own affairs for 70 years. Then you don't need to give anyone power of attorney unless you want to. And Mrs. Williams, if you don't mind me saying so, based on our interactions regarding your mother's estate, you seem perfectly capable of handling your own finances. That conversation gave me confidence. I wasn't useless, no matter what Sarah said. I wasn't a burden. I was a competent adult who deserved to be treated with respect, especially by my own daughter. I decided to take control of my financial situation, but I did it my way. I sold my mother's house and used the proceeds to buy a small, neat cottage in a nice neighborhood across town. I put the rest of the money in conservative investments. Nothing risky, but better than a savings account. I didn't tell Sarah about any of this. When she found out I'd bought a house, she was furious. Mom, you bought a house without consulting me? What if it's a bad investment? What if there are problems with it? Then I'll deal with them. It's my house, bought with my money. Your money? Mom, that money was supposed to be managed properly, invested for the future. It is invested in my future, in my happiness. Sarah was livid, but there was nothing she could do. The house was mine, fair and square. Over the next few months, our relationship deteriorated completely. Sarah would call occasionally, but only to criticize my decisions or lecture me about financial responsibility. She stopped inviting me to family gatherings. When I asked to see the grandchildren, she was always too busy. I was hurt, but I was also relieved. I was finally free from her constant criticism and manipulation. I could live my life without someone telling me I was doing everything wrong. And I was happy. Really happy. My little cottage was perfect for me. I had a beautiful garden, friendly neighbors, and for the first time in years, peace of mind. I joined a book club, started volunteering at the local animal shelter, even took up painting. I was discovering parts of myself I'd forgotten existed. But the peace didn't last. About 6 months after I'd moved into my cottage, Sarah showed up at my door unannounced. She looked different, older, more tired, stressed. "Mom, we need to talk." I let her in, but I was wary. Sarah hadn't visited me in months, and her sudden appearance couldn't be good news. "I need to borrow some money," she said without preamble. I was so surprised I almost laughed. "Excuse me?" "Robert's firm is going through some financial difficulties. We're having cash flow problems. I need to borrow about $20,000. $20,000? A third of my inheritance. Sarah, what happened to all that financial expertise you were so worried about me not having?" Her face flushed. "This is different. This is business. Sometimes businesses have temporary setbacks." "And you want me to bail you out?" "I want you to help your family. I want you to loan me money that I'll pay back with interest." I looked at my daughter, this woman who'd called me useless, who'd tried to manipulate me into giving her control of my finances, who'd cut me out of her life when I wouldn't comply with her demands. "No," I said simply. "No? Mom, this is serious. We could lose the house." "Then maybe you should downsize. Live within your means." "I can't believe you're being so selfish. After everything I've done for you." "What exactly have you done for me, Sarah? Because from where I'm sitting, you've done nothing but criticize me and try to control me." "I was trying to help you." "No, you were trying to help yourself. You saw an opportunity to get your hands on my inheritance early, and when I wouldn't let you, you wrote me off." Sarah's facade cracked. "Fine. You want to be bitter and vindictive? You want to punish me for trying to look out for your best interests? Fine. But don't come crying to me when you're old and alone and need help." "I'm already old and alone, Sarah. You made sure of that." She left that day, and I didn't hear from her again for over a year. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she and Robert had filed for bankruptcy, lost their house, and moved into a small apartment. I felt bad for the grandchildren, but I didn't regret my decision. Sarah had made her choices, and I'd made mine. Life went on. I continued to enjoy my retirement, my cottage, my new friendships. I traveled a little, something I'd never been able to do when I was working. I visited old friends, took some classes at the community college, lived my life on my own terms. I was content, maybe even happy, but there was still a part of me that missed my daughter, that hoped someday we might reconcile. I missed my grandchildren terribly. Then, about 2 years after Sarah's visit, I got a phone call that changed everything. "Mrs. Williams, this is Detective Martinez with the police department. I'm calling about your daughter, Sarah Thompson." My heart stopped. "Is she okay? Has something happened?" "She's been arrested on charges of embezzlement. We're investigating irregularities in her accounting work, and we need to ask you some questions." Embezzlement. My daughter, who'd been so concerned about my financial competence, had been stealing from her clients. The detective explained that Sarah had been taking money from several of her accounting clients, elderly people who'd trusted her to manage their finances. She'd been using their money to cover her own debts, always planning to pay it back, but the amounts had grown too large. When her clients started asking questions, the whole scheme unraveled. "We're trying to track down all the victims," Detective Martinez said. "Some of them have lost their life savings. Did your daughter ever have access to your financial accounts?" "She tried to get me to give her power of attorney, but I refused." "Smart move. You probably saved yourself a lot of heartache." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and tried to process what I'd learned. My daughter, the woman who'd called me useless, had been stealing from elderly people just like me. people who'd trusted her, believed in her professional expertise. I thought about how she'd pressured me, manipulated me, tried to make me feel incompetent and helpless. She hadn't been trying to protect me from financial mistakes. She'd been setting me up to be her victim. The trial was a media circus. Sarah's victims testified about how she'd gained their trust, convinced them to let her manage their money, then systematically stolen from them. Some of them had lost everything. I attended every day of the trial. I wanted to see the daughter I'd raised, wanted to understand how she'd become this person. Sarah's lawyer tried to paint her as a desperate mother who'd made bad choices to provide for her family, but the evidence was overwhelming. She'd been stealing for years, living a lifestyle she couldn't afford on money that wasn't hers. When she was sentenced to 5 years in prison, I felt empty. Not satisfied, not vindicated, just empty. This wasn't the justice I'd wanted. I'd wanted my daughter back, not to see her destroyed. But there was more to come. A few days after the sentencing, I got a call from James Patterson, the lawyer who'd handled my mother's estate. "Mrs. Williams, I have something rather unusual to discuss with you. Could you come to my office?" When I arrived, James had a serious expression on his face. "Mrs. Williams, I've been contacted by the court regarding your daughter's case. It seems there's been an unexpected development." He pulled out a thick folder and opened it on his desk. "Your mother, it turns out, had more assets than we initially discovered. Much more." I stared at him. "What do you mean?" "She had a safety deposit box that we weren't aware of when we probated her estate. The contents were only discovered during the investigation into your daughter's crimes. Apparently, your daughter knew about it and had been planning to... Well, let's just say she had plans for those assets." James opened the folder and showed me documents I'd never seen before. Stock certificates, bonds, certificates of deposit, all in my mother's name. "Your mother was apparently much more financially savvy than anyone realized. She'd been quietly investing for decades, never telling anyone about her portfolio. The total value is approximately $800,000. $800,000. I felt dizzy. "This money legally belongs to you as her sole heir," James continued. "But here's the interesting part. Your daughter knew about it. She'd been trying to get access to it for months before her arrest. She'd actually forged some documents trying to claim power of attorney over your mother's estate posthumously." The room was spinning. Sarah knew about this money. She not only knew about it, she was planning to steal it. The attempted forgery is what led investigators to some of her other crimes. If you'd given her power of attorney like she wanted, she would have had access to this money as well as your other inheritance. I sat back in my chair, trying to process everything. Sarah hadn't just been trying to control my $60,000. She'd been after nearly $1 million. She'd been willing to steal from her own mother, just like she'd stolen from her clients. "There's one more thing," James said gently. "Your mother left a letter. She instructed that it only be given to you if the additional assets were ever discovered." He handed me an envelope with my name written in my mother's familiar handwriting. With shaking hands, I opened it and read, "My dearest Helen, if you're reading this, it means my secret has been discovered. I never told you about this money because I wanted you to live your own life, make your own way. But I also hid it because I was worried about Sarah. I saw how she looked at things, how she talked about money. I was afraid that if she knew about this inheritance, she would try to take advantage of you. I hope I was wrong, but if I wasn't, I hope this money will give you the security and independence you deserve. You were always the best daughter a mother could ask for. Love, Mom." I sat in that lawyer's office and cried. My mother had known. She'd seen what I'd been too blind to see, and she'd protected me even after her death. The legal process took several more months, but eventually, all of my mother's assets were transferred to me. I was suddenly a wealthy woman, wealthier than I'd ever imagined I could be. But more importantly, I was vindicated. My instincts about Sarah had been right. My refusal to give her control over my finances had saved me from being another one of her victims. I hired James Patterson to handle my investments properly, set up trusts for my grandchildren's education, and made sure my affairs were in order. I kept living in my cottage, but I also started a small foundation to help elderly people who'd been financially abused by family members or caregivers. Sarah was released from prison after serving 3 years. She was a different person, humbled, broken, genuinely remorseful. She came to see me as soon as she got out. "Mom, I know I can never make up for what I did to you, what I tried to do. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness." I looked at my daughter, this woman who'd hurt me so deeply, and I felt pity. She'd lost everything: her family, her career, her reputation, her freedom. Her children barely spoke to her. Her ex-husband had remarried and moved across the country. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said honestly, "but I don't hate you." "I called you useless," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "My own mother who sacrificed everything for me, and I called you useless." "Yes, you did. I was wrong. About everything. You were never useless. You were the strongest, smartest person I knew, and I was too greedy and arrogant to see it." It was the first genuine thing she'd said to me in years. We didn't magically reconcile. Trust, once broken, doesn't heal overnight. But we started talking again, slowly, carefully. Sarah was working as a bookkeeper for a small nonprofit, trying to rebuild her life. She was going to therapy, trying to understand how she'd become the person who could steal from elderly people. "I kept telling myself I was helping them," she said during one of our conversations. "I convinced myself that I knew better how to manage their money than they did. I convinced myself that I deserved it more than they did." "Did you convince yourself that about me too?" She nodded, shame written across her face. "I thought you were weak. I thought you were naive. I thought you didn't understand how the world really worked." "And now?" "Now I realize you understood it better than I did. You understood that integrity matters more than money. You understood that how you treat people matters more than what you can get from them." It took 2 more years, but we eventually rebuilt some semblance of a relationship. Not the close bond we'd had when she was younger, but something honest and real. Sarah had to earn back my trust, and she worked hard to do it. My grandchildren, now teenagers, started visiting me again. They'd been through their own trauma, watching their mother's downfall, dealing with the shame and confusion of having a parent in prison. I tried to be there for them without undermining their relationship with Sarah. "Grandma," Emma said to me one day, "Mom told us she used to call you useless. That's not true, is it?" "What do you think?" I asked. "I think you're the most useful person I know. You help people, you take care of yourself, you make the world a little bit better. That's not useless." Out of the mouths of babes. I'm 78 now, and when I look back on this whole experience, I feel grateful. Grateful that I trusted my instincts when Sarah was pressuring me. Grateful that I stood up for myself when she tried to manipulate me. Grateful that my mother was wise enough to protect me even after her death. But mostly, I'm grateful that I learned I was never useless. I was never a burden. I was a woman who'd raised a child, worked hard her whole life, cared for her aging mother, and had every right to make her own decisions about her own life. Sarah was wrong about me, but she was also wrong about herself. She wasn't the financial genius she thought she was. She wasn't entitled to other people's money just because she thought she could manage it better. She wasn't superior to the elderly people she victimized. The real tragedy is that if she'd just been patient, if she'd just been kind, she would have inherited everything anyway. I never planned to take my money with me when I die. I always intended to leave everything to her and the grandchildren. But she couldn't wait. She couldn't treat me with basic respect and dignity. Her greed and arrogance cost her everything: her freedom, her family, her reputation, and ultimately the inheritance she was so desperate to get her hands on. Because now, most of my estate is going to charity and to my grandchildren's trusts. Sarah will get something, but not the fortune she was expecting. That's justice, I suppose. Not the cruel, vindictive kind, but the natural consequences kind. The kind where your choices determine your outcomes. I showed up to Sarah's sentencing with my lawyer, not because I wanted to see her punished, but because I wanted her to see that I wasn't the helpless old woman she thought I was. I was a woman who could stand up for herself, who could fight back when someone tried to take advantage of her. The useless old woman she'd dismissed was actually pretty damn formidable when she needed to be. And that's a lesson worth remembering. For anyone who thinks they can take advantage of someone just because they're older or quieter, or less flashy than they are. Sometimes the people you underestimate are the ones who surprise you the most. Sometimes the person you call useless is the one who ends up owning everything you thought should be yours. My daughter called me useless, but I showed up at her sentencing with my lawyer and my dignity intact. And that, my friends, is what real strength looks like.